Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dill, a disappointing end to year one under Mike Elko. Want to take a look at what we saw from the bowl game and talk about off-season questions. You know, what needs to change with this Texas A&M program going into year two? That was about as animated as you'll see Mike Elko post-game. He was extremely frustrated, specifically with the defense, specifically in the back end. I think the quote was, "We can't play zone coverage. We have to play man." That's alarming. And I think what's so frustrating about that is that's Mike Elko's bread and butter, like development specifically in the back end of the defense. And look, if there's a coach that I trust to get it right heading into the 2025 season, it is Mike Elko. He did note one thing that's really important, and that is he was very vocal that there were a lot of changes that needed to be made within this program from a way they practice, from how they prepare for football games. He said a lot of that, a lot of time and energy went into getting that right before you could get down to coaching football. And I think what he said was, hey, we got the culture right. Now we got to go coach some football better. I'm excited to see what year two looks like. Again, disappointing. Want to talk about, the good. What do we feel good about heading into 2025? Because it wasn't all bad, but we also have to talk about the things that need to be addressed really from a personnel standpoint. I think a few things were kind of glaring out to me, if you will. Fired up to get into it. Before we do, and as always, to the Texas A&M fans, number one, the amount of support many of y'all have been showing since Mike Elko's been hired has been amazing. The highs and the lows of the 2024 year. Can't thank you guys enough for rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and much more importantly, let it fly in the comment section. I think a lot of Texas A&M fans are feeling a little bit, I guess all over the place is probably the best way to describe it. Hey, optimistic going into year two. Also some serious concerns we got to address. Would love to hear from y'all in the comment section. Dill, let's start at the top. Marcel Reed, 31 points. I thought Marcel Reed was pretty damn sharp. And what excites me the most is, and I've said this all year, Marcel Reed took over halfway through the year where this offense was built around Connor Wigman. You got to kind of go 180 to Marcel Reed. The more and more you see Marcel Reed play, I think the better and better this kid gets. Going into the offseason being the guy that they're building the offense around, getting all those quarterback one reps on top of going into a year where you're going to have more talent around you at the wide receiver position. That was clearly something Mike Elko wanted to address in the transfer portal. You got to be feeling pretty good about the quarterback position for Texas A&M heading into 2025.
I would agree because I think you said it. Like, there was a pretty clear idea from Mike Elko that he didn't have the explosiveness in that wide receiver room that he would have wanted. And you've seen Marcel Reed throw some decent deep balls. Like that throw to Jade Walker, that's about as good as it gets. But there was also like no separation on that throw, so it had to be pretty much perfect. You look at what they're bringing in, led by a guy like Micah Hudson, and obviously some of the other additions. Like, I think you put an offense around him that's more talented. I think another big thing is what you kind of said, that second year in the system and just being more comfortable running that RPO style that I'm sure is kind of going to be the bulk of what they do next year, and being able to not have those fumbles in the exchanges and some of those small mistakes, but like turn the tide in like that South Carolina game, for example. So you clean up some of those. I mean, Marcel Reed throwing the ball, I think, was much better than I kind of thought he was going to.
100. He can make all the throws. And he can put some velo on those throws too, going to the boundary. Kind of reminds me of the storyline we were talking about with Kay Klubnik going from his first year starting to his second year starting, where it was a new offensive coordinator. The pass catchers weren't where they had to be around him back in 2023. And then, okay, year two as a starter, year two in the same Garrett Riley offense with pass catchers around him. We saw Kay Klubnik explode. I don't think that's crazy to talk about that being the direction with Marcel.
Because there aren't any of those like obvious things like, oh, he is just not accurate enough, or he doesn't have a strong arm, or he doesn't process on the field. Like, you're not seeing any of those like glaring, I think, weaknesses that are like, well, I'm not really sure that's fixable. That's just kind of who he is. Like, I think you can get better at the things that he probably struggled with.
Yes, and I think the processing and managing a pocket was probably number one for me. I thought he did a really good job of it. Like when it was time to go use your legs, He did a really good job doing so. But when it's time to step up in the pocket, keep your eyes downfield, deliver balls, I thought he did a really good job. And now I'm just kind of thinking, this is what would excite me if I'm a Texas A&M fan. All right, Marcel Reed going into his redshirt sophomore year. So he's got a couple of years of eligibility. Got Brady Hart coming in behind him. Terry Bussey going into year 2. Micah Hudson going into year 2. Mario Craver going into year 2. Jerome Miles coming in as a 5-star freshman wide receiver. Ruben Owens going into year 3 fully back healthy. There's a lot of young talent that's
I don't
being
want to leave
built
out
up.
Noah Thomas because you talk about a wideout who I think took a
Yeah.
big step this year. And again, he
Yeah.
was probably the only consistent player aside from Jabri Barber. Like those two were really the guys that felt like you could down in and down out kind of depend on. No, I still think there's another year for Noah
For
Thomas
Noah, yes.
and be able to catch the ball a little bit more consistently. Like you don't want that drop that just happened in that bowl game that led to a pick. But he is a guy, again, has made more plays, has made some explosive plays. Like I think he's really kind of settling into his own as well. So like you talk about the additions, but getting some of those guys back who I did think started to show a little bit more promise, especially late in the year. Like you certainly like that as well.
So the next thing that I'm excited about, and I promise Texas A&M fans, we are not sunshine pumping. We thought we'd start off a couple of minutes of positive talk. We'll get into what needs to get fixed. Thought the offensive line played pretty well, and that was the offensive line as good as Mike Elko wants to be? No. And that's why he brought in 7 guys on the offensive line in the 2025 recruiting class. He wants to build this thing along the lines of scrimmage. You got to be really optimistic about what Adam Cushing has done with this unit. Like from a personnel standpoint, I'm not sure if it's where Mike Elko wants it to be, but this is a unit that is playing some really good ball. I thought Coley on the at the center spot played really good. Comfortable with Ruben Fothery playing a little bit of guard.
And at least you're getting good, like physical play from them. Like again, the pass protection certainly needs to get better. You want that to kind of be the next step, but at least you're getting a unit that's playing really physical, moving guys off the ball, and they've run the ball pretty well for the most part in this 2024 year. Same kind of went for last night in the bowl game. Like this is a good physical offensive line. Again, another year of continuity, another year getting better in pass pro, which certainly needs to develop, if you will. But like the Bones, it's a much better unit than you saw.
You can tell they're a better coach team. You go back to the 2023 year under Coach Adazio, it was a disaster. Like the players weren't playing well, but the pass protection pickups and the blitz pickups were all over the place. Like you can tell it's going in the right direction. We got a guy that knows how to coach on the offensive line in Adam Cushing. Defense, really disappointing. I was up here in August talking about Texas A&M having maybe one of the best defenses in the country. They weren't as good stopping the run as I thought they would be. They certainly weren't as good in the back end, and Mike Elko made that very clear in his press conference. Let's start on the defensive line. The edge spot's going to be just fine. In fact, I think it's going to be really damn good. Cassius Howell, he looks like he might be a stud next year, will be a stud next year. Rylan Kennedy is starting to look the part, and we knew that was a guy that needed to put on some weight, but he's starting to look like it. You bring in guys like Jack Pyburn, not Jack Pyburn, excuse me, one after Jack Pyburn. You're bringing some guys like TJ Searcy that make you feel good about where the depth is in the edge room. My biggest concern is on the inside of the defensive line. The numbers were never great for Texas A&M last year in terms of depth. They were playing a lot of big bodies, a lot of snaps because I don't think they had a ton of confidence in the 2s and 3s. It showed up. I don't think it's a coincidence that Texas A&M played their worst football in the month of November. I also don't think it's a coincidence that Texas A&M played their worst defense in the fourth quarter. Those guys look tired. DJ Hicks played 55 snaps. They got to get more bodies in there. And quite frankly, they need some development from some of those guys who are supposed to be game wreckers for them in 2025. DJ Hicks is
the guy I'm looking at.
Yeah.
He needs to start playing dominant football. I think that's really important for this team, especially as you're about to lose a guy in Shamar Turner who's been very good, very disruptive for you. You need one of these guys now to emerge. And Albert Regas, I think he's doing what he's kind of going to do, like be a solid, decent stand-up double teams, eat up blocks a little bit. But they need probably more of a game record. And you look like, is it going to be a DJ Hicks or a Dalen Evans? Like someone's going to need to make it happen. And I don't think you've seen enough quite yet from DJ Hicks to really whet your appetite in that world.
Yeah, I agree. It's a top-end talent conversation. It's also a depth conversation. That's probably, to me, Yeah, some people might say secondary. I'm going to talk about the secondary in a sec. To me, probably on the inside of the defensive line is where I would address from a personnel standpoint. Going back to the secondary, way worse than we thought. And we had question marks about what it would be. My logic of thinking was, all right, Mike Elko is grabbing a lot of talented players to play in the secondary. They're all a lot of new faces. And we had question marks about how the gel would work. It just didn't come together as much as you thought, which I guess is reasonable in hindsight. It's a ton of guys that are year one guys within this Texas A&M defense with a year one scheme. I think the personnel's there, and I don't know if I'm crazy for saying that you need more consistency from a guy like Des Ricks, but we've seen what he can do when he's playing his best football. I think it just needs an offseason, and it's not me necessarily pressing the panic button because Mike Elko knows it's a problem and knows he wants to address it. I do trust Mike Elko now that, hey, we're past teaching culture, now back to teaching football. There's no reason an SEC team, even with all the new faces, can't play zone coverage. That's a community, that's a coaching thing, that's a communication thing.
And you've seen Mike Elko defenses going back to Duke, especially play so good, like not give up big plays, really make it hard to kind of march down consistently and like or be explosive and score a lot against his teams. Like that just wasn't the case for this A&M team this year. And that's like you look at Mike Elko, where's his faults? That probably does fall on his shoulders a fair amount, just like frankly said in the press conference.
Yeah,
like,
he did say that.
So there's no reason they should be playing that poorly because I'm with you. Like you look at, you got two guys in the boundary, Will Lee and Des Ricks, who I think are both talented players. You got safeties like Dalton Brooks and Ratcliffe, like guys who, again, show decent individual things at times. But just, again, kind of similar to what the problems were in 23, they don't play particularly great as a unit, and that's a huge problem.
I'm interested, and I should have looked this up before, and we'll probably talk about it a lot during this offseason. I'm interested to see what the numbers look like with Mike Elko year two. We see that a lot. That's not like we're Michigan fans. That year one under Mike McDonald, growing pains because it's a new defense and it's a little bit more complicated. Getting a lot of guys back together in 2025 in the same system, knowing what they want to do. Because to me, I don't think the personnel stinks. Like there's like we're Michigan fans. Oh, we need the quarterback play to get better. Well, dang, yeah, I was cost. It ain't gonna get better because we don't have the personnel back there. Like for me, Texas A&M, I don't think it's a bad team from a talent standpoint in the secondary. It just needs to start playing better. And hey, maybe when we get into the numbers and start talking in the offseason, maybe there's some evidence that year two it gets better, like there it is for a lot of other defensive coordinators and defensive,
especially because you're going to have a fair amount of continuity in the personnel.
Should.
Old secondary, a lot of those guys are going to be back, and it's not a unit they've gone particularly hard in the transfer portal.
Yeah, they have not.
We'll see you bring in Julian Humphrey. I think that's a good added piece. Big physical corner from Georgia, but it's not a unit that's being overturned. So I think Mike Elko looks like you kind of said it. Just like if this unit can develop another year of continuity and just play better together, it doesn't lack the talent. That's probably the big thing about it.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too. Look, it's disappointing to lose that football game. There's no way around that. I think there's a lot of things to be optimistic about heading into 2025. We got a lot to talk about. Some transfer portal additions are surely coming in. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.